You're just a waitress." The words cut through the elegant dining room like a knife. Every head turned. Every fork stopped. Elena Vasquez stood frozen, red wine dripping down the front of her white blouse, soaking through to her skin. The man who'd thrown it, Richard Caldwell, real estate titan, worth $300 million, was laughing. His wife was laughing. His investors were trying not to laugh. 30 years Richard had spent building his reputation, 30 years of making powerful men tremble at the sound of his name, and this waitress had dared to refuse his hand on her waist. Elena didn't cry, didn't run. She just looked at Richard with an expression he couldn't quite read. Why wasn't this simple peasant of a waitress trembling at his words? Why wasn't she begging for her job? Why was she looking at him like that, like she knew something he didn't? It made no sense. It angered Richard even more. But before we get to what happened next, let me tell you how we got here. That morning, Elena arrived at the Meridian just as the sun was painting the city gold. The restaurant wouldn't open for hours, but there was prep work to do, and Elena liked the quiet of early mornings. The Meridian was one of those places, the kind of restaurant where a glass of wine cost more than some people's grocery bills, where the leather in the booths was softer than most people's beds, where the wealthy came to see and be seen. Elena had worked here for 3 years. She knew every table, every regular, every secret the kitchen held. The other servers respected her. The regulars requested her by name. Even the cooks, notoriously territorial, treated her like family. She pushed through the kitchen doors and found Marco already at his station, chopping vegetables with the kind of speed that came from years of practice. Marco Reyes was the sous chef, stocky, kind-faced, with tattoos covering both forearms. He'd been Elena's closest friend at the restaurant since her first day. He was the only one who knew certain things about her, things she kept hidden from everyone else. "You're here early," Marco said without looking up. "Couldn't sleep." Elena grabbed an apron from the hook. "Big night tonight. Gerald's been sending emails since 4 a.m. Marco snorted. "Gerald sends emails if someone sneezes wrong. What's got him wound up this time?" "Richard Caldwell," she answered. Marco's knife paused. "The real estate guy? The one who's been trying to buy the building?" Elena nodded. "He's bringing investors tonight. Gerald wants everything perfect. And by perfect, I mean he wants us to grovel." "Great!" Marco resumed chopping. "Another rich guy who thinks the world owes him a bow." Elena tied her apron, her fingers moving through the familiar motions. "Diana's been stressed about him. He's been pressuring her to sell." Diana Chen was the owner of the Meridian. Elegant, composed, in her mid-50s, she'd been a mentor to Elena in ways that went beyond the restaurant business. "Will she?" Marco asked. Elena's face flickered with something. Concern, maybe, or determination. "I hope not." She changed the subject before Marco could ask more questions. Gerald Morrison, the manager, arrived an hour later in a cloud of anxiety and expensive cologne. He was a thin man, mid-40s, with the kind of face that was always either sneering at the staff or smiling at customers. He treated wealthy guests like royalty and everyone else like obstacles. He gathered the evening staff for a briefing that felt more like a threat. "Richard Caldwell is coming tonight with 3 investors. Table 12, I want our best on that table." His eyes landed on Elena. "That means you. Don't mess this up." "Of course, Gerald. I mean it, Elena. This man could buy the building. He could buy all of us. One wrong move and I understand." Gerald held her gaze a moment longer, then moved on to terrorize the busboys. Elena caught Marco's eye through the kitchen window. He mimed gagging. She suppressed a smile. Richard Caldwell arrived at 8 o'clock sharp. He entered the Meridian like he already owned it, shoulders back, chin high, expensive suit catching the light just so. His silver hair was slicked back from a tanned face. Gold cufflinks, gold watch, gold tie clip. Everything about him screamed money and power. His wife Victoria was on his arm. Blonde, dripping with jewelry, with the kind of smile that never quite reached her eyes. She looked around the restaurant the way a queen might survey her kingdom. Behind them came 3 men in suits, the investors. They looked impressed by the restaurant, by Richard, by everything. Gerald practically sprinted to greet them. "Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Caldwell, such an honor. Your table is ready. Right this way, please." He led them to table 12, the best in the house, positioned by the window with a view of the city lights. Elena followed with menus and water, her face professionally pleasant. "Good evening. Welcome to the Meridian. My name is Elena, and I'll be—" Richard snapped his fingers without looking at her. "Water, sparkling, and tell the sommelier we'll want to see the reserve list." "Of course, sir." She poured water. Richard talked to his investors about the building, about the development project, about the millions they'd all make. He never once acknowledged Elena's presence. Victoria, however, noticed her. Elena. Victoria read her name tag with amusement. "Is this really the best you can do with your life, Elena? Pouring water for people like us?" The investors chuckled. Richard smirked. Elena smiled politely. "I enjoy my work, Ma'am. Can I tell you about tonight's specials?" Victoria looked her up and down with barely concealed contempt. "I suppose not everyone can aspire to more." The meal progressed. Richard was charming to his investors, expansive, confident, full of promises about returns and growth. To Elena, he was something else entirely. He called her Elaine, then Ellen, then whatever your name is. He snapped his fingers to summon her instead of making eye contact. He made comments about the help, as if she wasn't standing right there. Elena remained professional, polite, perfect. She'd dealt with customers like this before. You learned to let it roll off. Then came the wine. Elena brought their 3rd bottle, a Chateau Margaux, $800, and began to pour for Richard. His hand landed on her waist. She stiffened. The bottle wavered slightly. She stepped back, pulling away as politely as she could manage. "Don't be like that." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. His hand reached for her again. "I'm just being friendly." Elena stepped back more firmly. "Please don't touch me, sir." The table went quiet. Victoria's eyebrows shot up. The investors exchanged uncomfortable glances. Richard's smile hardened into something ugly. "Excuse me? I asked you not to touch me." Elena's voice was calm, steady. "It's not appropriate." For a moment, Richard just stared at her, like he couldn't quite process that a waitress, had just told him no. Then Gerald appeared, having sensed the disturbance from across the room. "Is everything all right, Mr. Caldwell? I'm so sorry if there's a problem." Richard stood slowly. He picked up his wineglass, still half full of that $800 Bordeaux, and looked at Elena with cold fury. "You're just a waitress." His voice was loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "You don't tell me what to do." He threw the wine in her face. The restaurant went silent. 50 people watched red wine drip from Elena's hair, run down her face, soak through her white blouse. Victoria laughed, a sharp, delighted sound. Gerald immediately started apologizing. To Richard. "Mr. Caldwell, I am so sorry. She's fired, obviously. I'll deal with this immediately. Please enjoy the rest of your evening on the house." Richard sat back down, satisfied. He'd made his point. The natural order had been restored. Elena stood motionless, wine dripping, humiliated in front of everyone. Then she did something strange. She smiled, just slightly, an expression that Richard couldn't read. And she walked away. Gerald chased her to the back, his voice a furious hiss. "You're done. Don't bother coming back. You've ruined everything. Do you have any idea who that man is?" Marco intercepted them in the kitchen, stepping between Gerald and Elena, his hands balled into fists. "Back off, Gerald," he said. Gerald snarled at him. "This doesn't concern you, Marco. You let a customer assault her and you're blaming her. What kind of manager—" "It's okay, Marco." Elena's voice cut through their argument, calm, too calm. Let him have his moment. She untied her apron, folded it neatly, handed it to Marco. "Hold on to this for me." Marco stared at her. Something passed between them, an understanding he couldn't quite articulate. Elena walked out the back door, into the night, wine still dripping from her hair. Elena's home was not what you might expect for a waitress. It was a converted loft in a high-rise downtown, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Modern furniture, clean lines, expensive materials, art on the walls that wasn't from IKEA, the kind of place that cost more per month than most people made in a year. She took a long shower, watched the red wine swirl down the drain, taking the evening's humiliation with it. When she emerged, she put on comfortable clothes, poured herself a glass of whiskey, good whiskey, the kind that cost $200 a bottle, and sat by the window. The city glittered below her. Millions of lives, millions of stories, all those lights. She picked up her phone and made a call. "Diana, we need to talk about Richard Caldwell." The next morning, Elena walked into Diana Chen's office on the 32nd floor of a downtown skyscraper. Diana was waiting for her, looking uncharacteristically stressed. She was normally the picture of composure, elegant, controlled, the kind of woman who made difficult things look effortless. Today there were shadows under her eyes. "I heard what happened," Diana said. "Are you all right?" "I've had better nights." Elena settled into a chair. "How long has Caldwell been pressuring you?" Diana sighed. "Months? He started with offers, generous ones. When I refused, he got creative. Implied he could make things difficult. Hinted at connections with city inspectors, licensing boards, the usual rich man's toolkit. And you didn't tell me?" "I was handling it." Diana met her eyes. "Or trying to. Elena, maybe we should just sell. He's not going to stop. And if he really does have those connections—" "We're not selling." Diana blinked. "He's dangerous. He's ruined other businesses that wouldn't cooperate." "So have I." The words hung in the air. Here is the truth about Elena Vasquez. The thing that Richard Caldwell didn't know, that Gerald didn't know, that almost no one knew. Elena wasn't just a waitress. 3 years ago she'd sold her tech startup, a company she'd built from nothing in her 20s, for $40 million. She'd taken that money and invested it, grew it, made smart bets on smart people. And one of those investments was the Meridian. Elena owned 70% of the restaurant. Diana was her partner, her mentor, and, to the public, the face of ownership. That was how Elena wanted it. She'd asked Diana to front the operation so she could stay anonymous, stay invisible, so she could keep working the floor. Because Elena loved it, loved the work, loved the connections, loved being useful in a tangible way. The restaurant industry was full of owners who'd never cleared a table, never dealt with a difficult customer, never felt their feet ache at the end of a double shift. Elena never wanted to become that. So she tied on an apron and worked the floor, and no one ever knew they were being served by the owner. Until now. "What are you thinking?" Diana asked carefully. Elena looked out the window at the city below. "Tell me about Caldwell's finances." Diana frowned but pulled up what she knew. Richard Caldwell was wealthy, on paper, but he was leveraged to the hilt on his current development project. He needed the Meridian's building. Without it, his condo tower couldn't move forward. His investors were getting nervous. His financing was shaky. "There's more," Diana added. "His key investor is a man named Patterson, conservative, Risk-averse. He's been asking hard questions. If Patterson pulls out, the whole deal collapses. Elena nodded slowly. The shape of a plan was forming. I'm going to make some calls. I want everything on Caldwell, every lawsuit, every unpaid contractor, every whisper of impropriety. I know people who can dig. And then what? Asked Diana. Elena turned from the window. And then I'm going to destroy him. Diana studied her for a long moment. He doesn't know who you are. He thinks you're just a waitress he got fired. Good. Elena's smile was sharp. I want to keep it that way. Whatever happens, I want him to lose to a waitress. Over the next 24 hours, Elena activated her network. Her lawyer, an old friend from her startup days, pulled everything public on Richard Caldwell. There was a pattern. Promises made and broken, contractors stiffed, lawsuits settled quietly, complaints that mysteriously went nowhere. Her accountant found the pressure points in his financing. One major investor walks, and the whole thing falls apart. Marco texted from the restaurant. Caldwell made another reservation. Tomorrow night. Patterson will be there. Elena read the message twice. Tomorrow night. That was her window. She returned to the Meridian that afternoon. Gerald's face when he saw her was priceless. Shock, then outrage, then confusion when Diana appeared behind Elena. She's fired! Gerald sputtered. I fired her myself. She can't be here. Diana's voice was cool. Elena is an old friend, Gerald, and I've decided to give her another chance. She'll be working tonight. She paused. Is that clear? Gerald's mouth opened and closed like a fish. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. Of course, Ms. Chen. Whatever you say. Elena tied her apron back on, caught Marco's eye through the kitchen window. He grinned and mouthed, Welcome back. Elena spent the next day doing what she loved, working the floor. She served a young couple celebrating their anniversary, nervous about the prices until Elena put them at ease with wine recommendations and warm conversation. She sat with an elderly regular who came every Thursday, remembering that his late wife's favorite dessert was the chocolate soufflé, bringing him a slice on the house. This was why she did this job. These moments, these connections, the ability to make someone's day a little brighter, a little easier. Gerald watched her with suspicion. He didn't understand why Diana had overruled him, didn't understand Elena's quiet confidence. He would, eventually. Richard Caldwell arrived at 8 o'clock, Patterson in tow. No Victoria tonight. This was strictly business. 2 bodyguards waited outside in a black SUV. Gerald rushed to greet them, falling over himself with apologies about that incident and assurances that it had been handled. Richard barely acknowledged him. His attention was on Patterson, a cautious-looking man in his 60s with silver-framed glasses and the demeanor of someone who read every line of every contract twice. They took a table by the window. Richard ordered an expensive bottle of wine without looking at the price. Elena approached their table. Richard looked up. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by amusement. You. He smiled that cruel smile. I thought you were fired. Ms. Chen gave me another chance. Elena's voice was pleasant, professional. I wanted to apologize for any inconvenience the other night, Mr. Caldwell. It won't happen again. She handed them menus. Richard smirked, satisfied by what he saw as submission. A waitress, properly humbled, the natural order restored. See that it doesn't. He turned back to Patterson, already forgetting her. To him, she was invisible now, just part of the furniture, exactly what Elena wanted. Because a waitress is invisible. A waitress hears things. A waitress is privy to conversations that powerful men have when they think no one important is listening. Elena poured water, refilled wine, cleared plates. And all the while, she listened. Richard was working Patterson hard. The building acquisition, the condo development, the returns they'd see. His voice was confident, expansive, full of promises. But Patterson was asking questions. Hard questions. About timelines. About financing. About whether the building owner would actually sell. "It's handled," Richard assured him. "The owner is desperate. She'll take whatever I offer." Elena suppressed a smile as she refilled Patterson's water glass. Midway through the meal, Richard excused himself to take a phone call. He stepped away from the table, leaving Patterson alone. Elena approached with the wine bottle. "More wine, sir?" Patterson nodded absently, distracted. Elena poured. "The Caldwell project sounds exciting." Her voice was light, casual, just making small talk. "Mr. Caldwell must be very experienced with developments like this." Patterson was barely listening. "It must be complicated, though. I hear the city has been asking a lot of questions lately. Investigations, permits, that sort of thing." She said it casually. Like gossip. Like something she'd overheard and didn't really understand. But the word landed. Patterson looked up. "Investigations?" Elena shrugged. "I'm just a waitress. I don't really understand business. I'm sure it's nothing." She smiled and walked away. The seed was planted. Richard returned to find Patterson in a different mood. Quieter, more cautious, asking questions about Richard's past projects, about contractors, about permits. Richard laughed them off, but there was an edge to his voice now, a crack in the confidence. When they left, Elena watched from the window. She could see them in the parking lot, Patterson with his arms crossed, leaning away, Richard gesturing, explaining, reassuring. They parted without shaking hands. Elena noticed something else. Richard hadn't left a tip. She pulled out her phone and made a call to her contact at the press. "It's Elena. Remember that story we discussed? I think it's time." 2 days later, the article appeared. "Real estate developer faces questions over past projects." Nothing libelous, just facts and questions. Unpaid contractors, delays, lawsuits settled quietly. A pattern. The same day, Richard Caldwell showed up at Diana's office. Unannounced. Aggressive. "I want to buy the building, now. 20% above market value. Cash." Diana, calm, composed, following the script, shook her head. "I need to consult with my partner." "Partner?" Richard's eyes narrowed. "What partner? You're the owner." "My silent partner. She makes the final decisions on any sale." Richard went very still. "Who is she?" Diana smiled, said nothing else. Richard left furious. He didn't know who this silent partner was, but he was going to find out. Richard hired a private investigator, expensive, discreet, the best. The investigator hit walls everywhere. The ownership of the Meridian was buried under layers of LLCS, trusts, and holding companies. No name attached. No trail to follow. Meanwhile, Richard's world was crumbling. Patterson called. He was pulling his investment. The article had spooked him. Other investors were wavering. The financing for Richard's development was collapsing like a house of cards. Richard needed that building. Without it, without the deal, he was ruined. He called Diana, his voice tight with barely controlled desperation. "I need to talk to your partner. Tonight. Now." Diana paused. "I'll ask if she's willing to meet." An hour later, she called back. "My partner will meet you. Tonight. The Meridian, after closing. She wants to discuss the building." Richard agreed immediately. He was drowning, and this was a lifeline. He arrived at 11 p.m. The restaurant was dark, empty, chairs stacked on tables. The only light came from a single table in the center of the room, illuminated by candlelight. Sitting at the table was a woman. She looked different. Hair down, falling in dark waves over her shoulders. An elegant dress that probably cost more than a month's rent. Diamond earrings catching the candlelight. But something about her was familiar. Richard approached, frowning. "Where's the owner? I'm here to meet Diana's partner." The woman gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit down, Richard." He sat, confused. "I don't understand. I'm here to meet the owner, not—" He trailed off. Recognition was dawning. Slowly. Like a man realizing he's stepped into a trap. The waitress, the wine, that strange smile. "You," he said. "Me?" Elena agreed. Elena let the silence stretch. Let him sit with it. "That's impossible." Richard's voice was barely a whisper. "You're a waitress. You're nobody." Elena slid a folder across the table. "I'm the majority owner of this restaurant. Have been for 3 years." She watched his face as he processed this. "And I know more about you than you know about me." Richard opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside, everything. His debts, his lawsuits, his unpaid contractors. Evidence of bribes. A pattern of cruelty that stretched back decades. "I'm not selling you this building, Richard. Not now. Not ever." His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and finally, rage. "You can't do this to me. Do you have any idea who I am? I'll destroy you. But Elena held up a hand to interrupt him. "With what?" Elena's voice was calm. "Your money? I have more. Your connections? I know everyone you know. Your reputation?" She tapped the folder. "One phone call, and this goes to every news outlet in the city." Richard reached for the folder. Elena pulled it back. "But I'm not unreasonable. I'll give you a choice." She laid out the options. "Option 1. You sign your company over to me. I become majority shareholder. Your debt becomes my debt, which I can afford. Your company becomes mine to fix." Richard stared at her. "Why would you want my failing company?" "Because I'm good at turning things around. I built a tech startup from nothing and sold it for $40 million. Your company isn't worthless. It's just been run by someone who treats people like garbage." She smiled slightly. "Under new management it could be profitable, and there's a certain poetry in having you work for me. As my employee, following my instructions." Richard's face reddened. "Option 2. I release everything. Every document. Every victim statement. By morning, you're finished, bankrupt, probably facing criminal charges." Silence. Richard's jaw tightened. "You're just a—" "Don't." Elena's voice was ice. "Don't say it again." The silence stretched. Richard looked at the folder. At Elena. At the folder again. He signed. 3 months later. The Meridian was different now. The same elegant space, the same perfect food. But the energy had shifted. Staff smiled more, laughed more. Gerald was gone, fired for failing to protect his employees. The new manager was Elena herself, though most customers still didn't know she owned the place. Marco was head chef now. His food was extraordinary. And Richard Caldwell? Richard was working the floor. He wore the same black button-up shirt and apron that Elena had once worn. He poured water, took orders, said, "Yes, sir," and "Right away, ma'am." It was a condition of Elena's bailout, 6 months of service work, learning what it felt like to be on the other side. He hated every second of it. But he had no choice. One evening, a group of young men came in. Rich kids, trust fund types, loud and entitled. They took a table in Richard's section. They treated him the way he had once treated Elena. Snapping fingers, mispronouncing his name, making comments about the help. One of them deliberately spilled his drink. "Clean it up, old man. What are you waiting for?" The others laughed. Richard's face burned. He knelt to clean the spill, hands trembling with humiliation. Elena appeared. "Gentlemen." Her voice was calm, but carried authority. "I'm the manager here. Is there a problem?" The ringleader smirked. "Yeah, your waiter has an attitude problem. Maybe you should fire him." Elena looked at Richard, still kneeling on the floor, then back at the young men. "Actually, I think you should leave." "Excuse me. You're being disrespectful to my staff. That's not acceptable here. Please settle your bill and go." The young man stood, outraged. "Do you know who my father is?" Elena didn't blink. "I don't care who your father is. You don't treat people like that. Not in my restaurant." Security appeared. The young men were escorted out, sputtering threats that would go nowhere. The restaurant was quiet for a moment. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in. Elena helped Richard to his feet. He looked at her with something like confusion. "Why did you do that? After everything I did to you?" Elena straightened his apron. "Because no one, not even you, deserves to be treated as less than human for doing their job." She met his eyes. "That's the difference between us, Richard. I never forgot what it's like to serve." "You never learned." She walked away. Richard stood there for a long moment, something shifting behind his eyes. Later that evening, the door opened. A woman entered, middle-aged, nervous, clutching her purse. She looked around the upscale restaurant like she didn't belong. Her clothes were simple, clean but worn. The hostess hesitated, uncertain. Elena appeared. "Hi there. Table for one." The woman looked relieved. Is that okay? I've always wanted to come here, but I felt like—" She trailed off. "Like it wasn't for people like me." Elena smiled warmly. Took a menu. "It's for everyone. Come on, I've got the perfect table for you." She led the woman to a seat by the window. The best view in the house. As she handed over the menu, the woman looked at her. "Thank you. Really." Elena just smiled. "Enjoy your evening." She walked back to the floor, ready for the next guest. If this story moved you, hit that like button. It helps more than you know. Subscribe and turn on notifications for more stories like this one. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.